Dino Ambrosi. I think a lot of you have probably heard about Dino from your student from your child in the past day or two. I know it's had a big, profound effect on the faculty as well. So I'm so excited for all of you to hear from Dino. He is the founder of Project Reboot. He's a recent Cal graduate, and while he was there his senior year, kind of where this all took off, started to teach his own class called Becoming Tech Intentional. He has spoken at schools all around the world, and I feel so lucky that we have him here in our Bentley Commons to speak to all of you. So with that, Dino.
All right. Well, first off, thank you all so much for coming out. I know it's not always easy to make time at the end of what I'm sure was a busy day, so it means a lot that you're here. I'm really excited to share everything in this presentation with you. I want to start by just giving you an overview of what to expect, because we are going to cover a lot of ground over the course of the next hour. We're going to start off by talking about this concept of tech addiction. I'm going to define it in my own terms and tell you my experience developing and overcoming one. We'll then move into this question of what does it actually mean to have a healthy relationship with technology? I will call out a few key areas that I think we really need to focus on. And one thing I want to highlight for those first two sections of tonight's presentation, they're virtually identical to what the students saw at Bentley yesterday. And that's very intentional. I think one of the challenges that we have is this problem's so new, it happens so fast. We don't really have great common language and understanding to talk about it with. So coming into a school community and giving everyone some shared understanding, common ground to have discussions from is a big part of what I try to do. So just know when you go home, that first 40 minutes of the presentation, same exact content that your kids saw, so you can reference it with them. Then we'll move into some advice that I have for approaching screen time in the household. Before I give you any parenting advice, I will acknowledge my massive blind spot as a 25-year-old that doesn't have any kids. So I'll just call that out for what it is. Obviously, I don't have the full picture, so it can feel a little bit weird for me to give advice on that, but I have been in a position to have hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations with middle school students, high school students, college students over the course of the last 4 years, and have picked up on a lot of patterns in how they view and use technology, as well as approaches that parents have taken in their lives and how they've landed, what's worked and what hasn't. So I do think there are some general patterns that will be helpful for you to hear, but obviously every kid is different, every family is different. You know your kids far better than I do. So take it all with kind of a grain of salt and apply it to your own family situation, and we'll have abundant time for Q&A at the end to talk about specific circumstances. Last note that I'll make, I'm going to be going over a lot of tips, strategies, resources for yourself and for your kids. Don't feel the need to write any notes. There's a QR code at the end of the presentation that has all of that summarized with links and everything, so you can just sit back and enjoy and not worry about that. Cool. All right, well with that, all that being said, I do want to apologize because I'm going to start off this presentation on a little bit of a heavy note, so bear with me, I'm going to freak you out a little bit. The dots on this screen represent an adult life in months, assuming a life expectancy of 90. So for an 18-year-old, this is an optimistic estimate of how many months they have left. So take a second to take that in. It's probably not as many as you would expect. And we also have to take into account sleep, which should take up about 1/3 of those months if we're sleeping 8 hours a night. Not that that's a bad thing, sleep is great. For someone that works just a typical 40-hour per week job until they're 65 years old, they'll spend about 126 of these months actively working or studying. About 18 will be spent driving, probably more if you stay in the Bay Area for all of these years. About 36 cooking and eating, 36 doing chores and errands, and about 27 in the bathroom and taking care of personal hygiene, which is a long 2+ years that all of us are in for. So that leaves 334 months, optimistically, for everything else in this hypothetical 18-year-old's life. So to start off tonight's presentation, I want to just ask you all to take a second and think to yourself, what deserves the largest chunk of that remaining free time? Does anyone want to share? What comes to mind?
Spending time with family.
Spending time with family. I love that answer. Yeah.
And friends.
And friends, definitely. Vacation, traveling. Yeah. All the boxes on your bucket list. All the places you want to visit, all the people that you love that you want to spend time with, the hobbies, the passions, the interests. All of it has to come out of these 334 months. Now, when I ask students this question, no kid says TikTok. I've never gotten that answer once. But does anyone want to guess who hasn't seen this graph before? How many of those 334 months the average 18-year-old in the United States is currently on pace to spend looking at a screen non-productively?
80%.
80%? What do you think?
120.
120 months, okay. Anyone else? Let's take one more guess. Don't be shy.
200?
200, okay.
Per month?
All right, well, all those guesses were too low. It is 312 of those 334 months.
Oh my God.
So let me unpack this, because I know that this is a crazy stat to see. First off, again, when I say screen time, I'm saying non-productive screen time. So we're not talking about anything related to school or work. We're also not even talking about communication. This isn't texting, it's not FaceTiming, it's not Google Maps, it's not the calculator app. This is based off of, not that they're using it that much anyway. This is based off of Common Sense Media's most in-depth research that they've done on youth screen time in the US. It found the average 13 to 18-year-old spends 8 hours and 39 minutes per day looking at social media, entertainment platforms like YouTube and Netflix, and video games combined. 8 hours and 39 minutes per day is the average.
Even during the school week?
Even during the school week. So that means about half of them are above that. And I wish that I were exaggerating when I tell you, I have seen iPhone screen time reports from Berkeley students in the middle of the semester who have confirmed this data is not a glitch, this is actually accurate. I've seen as high as 15 to 16 hours per day. Dead serious. So let's take a second to really process how sad that is, right? Imagine getting to the age of 90 and someone shows you this graph of how you spent all your time after the age of 18, and you look at this and think about all the things that you could have done with that free time that you did not do because you got distracted. Now, I've shown this graph to tens of thousands of students now, and I almost always get one of two reactions to it. Some of them look at me like there is a grizzly bear standing behind me on stage, and I can just see the fear in their eyes as they grapple with how their screen time scales over a lifetime. Those are the kids that are not happy with how they're using technology, and many of them feel that way. But I know at pretty much every school I speak at, especially at schools like Bentley, there are quite a few students that look at this and their first reaction is, okay, it's a wild graph that you have there, but it doesn't apply to me. Because I'm not spending 8 hours and 39 minutes per day. My parents have all these restrictions on my screen time anyway. I'm down at, I don't know, 2 hours a day during the week, maybe 3, 4 during the weekends. And frankly, this whole conversation about screen time and smartphones and social media is just way overblown. It is not that big of a deal. It's parents and adults freaking out about something that just didn't exist when they were growing up. I know that a lot of them feel that way because that is exactly how I felt when I was in high school not too long ago. All things considered, I had a pretty positive relationship with my iPhone, social media, the internet in general growing up. I spent a non-insignificant amount of time on it, probably 2 to 3 hours per day on average, but it really felt like time well spent. I was connecting with people, I was consuming content that entertained me and introduced me to new ideas, and when I would hear the concern around screen time from parents, I really just shrugged it off. I did not take it very seriously. But my perspective changed a lot when I graduated high school and went to college, because I was just not ready for how difficult that transition was going to be. I got to UC Berkeley, not too far from here, in the fall of 2017, just generally underprepared. Academically, way harder than anything I'd ever done. First time away from home, all these distractions. But the biggest challenge I didn't see coming was the decrease in the structure of my time. Because from kindergarten all the way through the end of high school, I showed up to campus each day, and my calendar looked something like this. I was going from class to class to class on a bell schedule. I had sports and extracurriculars. There were very few hours during the week that I actually had to make decisions about. It was almost all managed for me. And then I got to Berkeley, and my first semester of classes looks like this. That's my actual class schedule from fall 2017. So look at all these gaps. I mean, 4 hours in the middle of the day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I have nowhere I have to be. Thursday, that chemistry discussion, totally optional. There's a day in the middle of the week that I don't even have to go to school as an 18-year-old. I was overwhelmed with joy when I saw this for the first time. I couldn't believe my eyes. But I shouldn't have been so excited because I had no idea how to manage all of this time. I'd never done it before. And I will be honest, I did not prioritize things as well as I probably could have during that first month of college. I fell pretty far behind. My first math midterm rolled around, and I got a 20% on my first test of college. So a bit of a wake-up call. And I remember having this conversation with myself and thinking, okay, I'm not gonna let this happen. I did not come here to fail out of school. I'm really gonna buckle down and pull myself out of this hole that I've dug myself into. But this was the first time in my life, personally, that I was dealing with pretty chronic levels of stress. I had experienced some stress and anxiousness growing up. I think all kids do, to differing degrees. I'm pretty fortunate. Those were not dominating emotions in my childhood. This was a totally new level for me. My identity as a star student was being challenged. I went from being a pretty big fish in a small pond to a very small fish in a very big pond. That was difficult. I didn't think I was smart enough to be in the classes I was in. I had no idea what I wanted to do for a career after graduating. I was super nervous about disappointing my parents who were helping to put me through college. And in hindsight, great opportunity. I could have grown so much had I just confronted this challenge head on. But unfortunately, I did not have to do that. Because sitting in my pocket all the time was this instant escape from all of this stress that I could turn to whenever I wanted. And what happened during that first semester of school is my phone became my coping mechanism for stress. And this started in a really innocent way. I'd be in the library, get stuck on a math problem, start to feel stressed out. I would rationalize taking a study break by going to Instagram for 5 minutes, which would usually turn into half an hour or an hour, maybe you've been there. And it should be clear, that's really not a good response to stress. Because you're just avoiding whatever made you stressed in the first place, and that's only going to add more stress in the long run. The test is still gonna happen, the assignment's still gonna be due. When that additional stress arrives, well, now you've already started to condition yourself to run away from it by turning to your phone. And what I didn't realize at the time is the more times you go through this cycle, the more you decrease your tolerance for all forms of discomfort. So all of a sudden, it's not just stress that makes you open up Instagram or YouTube and start scrolling. It's boredom, it's anxiousness, it's social awkwardness, it's loneliness. I got to the point I couldn't even fall asleep at the end of the day without being on my phone. Literally just lying in bed and being alone with my thoughts, that was too uncomfortable for me to deal with. The inner monologue of, wow, that day did not go the way that I wanted it to. I would just run away from it by watching YouTube videos until I passed out every night, usually at 1 or 2 in the morning. So now I'm getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I'm waking up, I'm not well rested. It's even harder to resist the urge to go to my phone the next morning. So I fall farther behind in school and I get more stressed out, which makes me turn to my phone even more. So I hope it's clear, this can be a really vicious cycle. And it does not take long for a phone to go from being this tool that genuinely enhances your life to effectively being a digital pacifier that you use to numb uncomfortable emotions. And that's a really damaging thing, because I know it's cliche to say, but I really believe it's true. Discomfort is required for any meaningful form of growth that we're after. You just can't learn difficult concepts or build hard skills or improve in athletics or physical fitness or even develop socially and emotionally if you can't deal with some form of discomfort. And this inability to cope with discomfort because of my relationship with my phone stunted my growth in college. I thought I was going to go to Berkeley and it was going to be this amazing experience where I blossomed into this far better version of myself. Instead, it literally felt like I went backwards. By the end of my sophomore year, I felt like I was a shell of the person that I was in high school. And looking back, even though my screen time was not that concerning when I was a middle school and high school student, the seeds of this problem had been planted for a very long time. I had already started to use technology as an escape, probably within a few weeks of getting my first iPhone back in 6th grade. It just couldn't become this huge problem because my calendar was so full. I didn't have 5 or 6 hours a day that I could spend on my phone. So I always tell the students that look at that graph of the months and think, it doesn't really apply to me, I don't spend that much time. It's not necessarily how much time you're spending that really matters. It's the way in which you're using it. Specifically, are you running towards it with a purpose, or are you using it to run away from something else? Because if it is the latter, it does not take long for that to spiral out of control. Now, there were a lot of consequences to this. And I don't want to be too negative. I could stand up here for a long time and talk about all the ways in which this affected me. I'll keep it relatively short. I wasted so much time during what are supposed to be some of the most fun years of your entire life. I spent about 5 hours a day scrolling through Instagram and watching YouTube videos, mostly while lying in bed. And that sucks to look back on. It really does. It viscerally pains me to think back to a few of the periods in freshman and sophomore year in particular, where I was just letting moments that could have become memories with some of my best friends in the world now, opportunities just slip right through my fingertips because of how pulled into my phone I was. But by far the biggest impact was to the way that I viewed myself, because I knew that this was a problem. This was not due to a lack of awareness. I had seen my screen time report. I thought to myself, wow, 5 hours a day. That's literally more time than I'm spending studying. That's not a healthy amount of screen time. I tried to get it down at multiple points. I deleted Instagram and YouTube from my phone, thinking that was going to solve the problem. And then I would just start turning to them on my laptop. And a couple weeks later, I'd come up with some excuse to re-download them. All of a sudden, I'm right back where I started. I really do not use this word lightly, but it was an addiction. And after a number of failed attempts to resolve it, I just didn't see a path out. I felt completely trapped in it. I just became resigned to it. I just started to view myself as someone that was addicted to technology, that became part of my identity. And then I got very fortunate. I got the opportunity to hit the reset button. I was offered this internship at a startup in New York that required me to take a semester off of school. And I jumped at that because I knew that I just needed this full environment change to break out of these bad habits that I built up in Berkeley. So I moved out there in January of 2020. Turns out that was a horrible time to move to New York. I was not there for very long. But while I was there, I made some really big changes. I got off of all social media for about a month. I started to rebuild some good habits that I had lost, started to exercise again. And at this internship, I was surrounded by some coworkers that really knew how to use technology well. They actually had tools and systems for managing their time, for making sure no work was falling through the cracks, and for learning things that made them better at their jobs. And it was just this aha moment for me, that the same devices that had held me back for so long could actually really make my life better if I learned how to use them in the right way. So I just went all in on improving my relationship with technology. And over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, my life turned around in a number of areas. I went from barely being able to run a couple of miles to doing my first marathon a little over a year after moving out to New York. That is something I never thought I would be able to do, but it turns out when you have an extra 3 hours per day that you can spend however you want, there's a lot that you can do at that time. I did pretty well in the internship. They promoted me to a full-time role. I worked there for a year and a half, awesome experience. And then I got back to Berkeley, and it was just night and day. It was so much easier. Because not only did I have all of this extra time, I had the tools and systems and strategies to use it well. So I went from barely passing classes to getting straight A's for the first time in college, while still having time to hang out with friends and make a lot of great memories that I can look back on fondly. So I share that story with you all because it highlights this really important point, which is that our devices can be weight vests or they can be jetpacks. They definitely have the power to hold us down and make life a lot more difficult than it needs to be, but they also can lift us to new heights. And the direction that they move us, I believe, is really just a question of our ability to use them intentionally. But that is not an easy thing to do. And unfortunately, the vast majority of us aren't receiving any guidance on how to build this positive and intentional relationship with our devices. So when I got back to Berkeley for my senior year, I decided to create this semester-length course called Becoming Tech Intentional. And the idea was to basically condense this year-and-a-half-long tech transformation that I had gone through into a set of steps that anyone could follow to effectively reset their tech habits. So I made the application for this class, and I put it on Berkeley's website with very low expectations around how many students would apply. We needed to fill 17 seats in order to be allowed to run the class, and I was really nervous that wasn't going to happen. I mean, it's a class about spending less time on your phone. How many college students do you think would apply to that? I thought maybe we would get 5 to 10 applicants. We had over 400 applications come into this class. Every semester I taught it, I had to shut the application down early because I could not process all of the submissions. And I want to share with all of you some of the responses to the first question on this application, which was describe your current relationship with your phone. So I think it's helpful to hear it from other students outside of myself. So I had one student say, a couple of weeks ago, my phone was run over by a Ford Fiesta. The feeling was akin to losing a pet. So let's all take a brief moment of silence. But some of the responses were a little bit more striking than that. I had one student say, my current relationship with technology is trash. I scroll on Instagram or TikTok late at night, knowing that I need to sleep, but feeling like I physically can't get off my phone. I waste so much time, I feel like an addict, my phone enables my procrastination, and I hate it. I'm stuck in this negative feedback loop. I hate it so much, but sometimes it just feels like I'm in too deep to break it. I'm currently losing the war for control over my life. So again, real Berkeley students that are saying that. And even though I would have written very similar things on this application just a couple years before, I was really shocked to see so many responses like this. Because when I was struggling with my screen time, I actually thought I was the only one that had this problem this bad. It didn't make any sense to me. I could not figure out why I couldn't keep myself from spending 5 hours a day looking at this stupid little rectangle sitting in my pocket. The only explanation that checked out in my mind at the time was that there was something wrong with me. I just assumed it was my fault. I put all the blame on myself. I had a lot of shame around this. If anyone had seen my screen time report, I would have been mortified. So I didn't talk to anybody. I just bottled this up and beat myself up over it internally for years. And all of my students had been doing the same thing. We got into one room together and it was like you could see the weight being handed off to others as they realized it wasn't just them. And over the last 3 years since graduating from Cal now, I've traveled all over, I've talked to students in 7 countries, I've had hundreds of conversations with them about this. My number one takeaway: we are still dramatically underestimating how widespread this problem is and how much kids are aware that it's an issue. But it should be clear, the average 18-year-old would not be spending almost 9 hours a day looking at screens non-productively if that was because there was something wrong with them individually. That's indicative of a much deeper and broader problem. And I would say it's really just downstream of the way that the companies that make the technology that we use on a daily basis make money. And I'll acknowledge the idea to make social media free, I actually think was really noble at the beginning. It's an idealistic thing to give everyone access to it. But it comes with this set of negative incentives, because if you are not paying to use Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, they have to make money off of you in some other way. If you're not their customer, you become their product. And they profit by selling access to our time, attention, and information. So the unfortunate byproduct of that is their bottom line, how much money they take home at the end of the day, is really just a function of how much of this free time can they capture. So naturally, they've done everything they can to get more of it. Over the last 20 years, they've worked with the world's leading psychologists and neuroscientists. They've partnered very closely with the gambling industry and have analyzed slot machines with extreme attention to detail to understand why people get pulled into them. They've looked at billions of data points, all in the name of getting us to scroll more. And because we only have so much free time, they're actually all in a battle with each other to get more of it. So anytime one of them figures out something that works, all of them have to do the same thing. This has happened in a lot of ways, but recently TikTok had a massive breakthrough. They realized if you are a social media app, it does not make sense to let the people using your app decide what they want to look at. That was their big breakthrough. Because this is what Instagram used to look like. Does anyone remember this app? That's what I downloaded when I was in 7th grade. That is a social media app. The whole reason that we got on Instagram and Facebook in the first place, they were supposed to be tools that helped us stay connected with people that matter to us. When we scrolled through our feeds, it was friends, it was family members, maybe it was a couple of celebrities or athletes or influencers that we decided we wanted to follow, but we had the choice. It was under our control. And then TikTok comes along and they say, wait, why would we limit ourselves to only showing them content from accounts they've opted into? We'll just pull from everything that's ever been uploaded to TikTok. We can keep them scrolling for way longer. It worked remarkably well. Time on Instagram plummeted. They started losing money. What did Instagram have to do? They had to basically embed TikTok into their app. Instagram Reels just is TikTok. And then YouTube added Shorts, and Snapchat added Spotlight, which for those of you that don't know, is TikTok again on the Snapchat app. And I don't know if you've seen this, but now LinkedIn has their own version of Reels that's on the platform. It's like the worst collection of content on the internet. But it's there, it's gone everywhere. So what's happened over the last decade is that social media has gone from being social media to being entertainment. And for anyone in here with an Instagram account, I challenge you, the next time you open it up, scroll through your first 25 posts and count. How many posts come from someone that you personally know? It's almost definitely less than half, probably significantly less than half. And many will be from accounts that you don't even follow. So is that social media, or is it something else? I would say it's kind of like a bite-sized version of Netflix at this point. So all of us are walking around with this very meticulously engineered dopamine factory sitting in our pockets all the time designed by some of the smartest people on the planet, with the explicit goal of sucking up more of our time and attention by giving us a rabbit hole that we can run down whenever we want to escape something. That's not natural. We're not designed to have access to instant gratification and a never-ending stream of information like that all the time. And there are consequences to it, beyond the amount of time that it consumes. Now, again, I don't want to be too negative here. We could spend this whole presentation talking about all the mental health studies that are coming out, and attention span, and all these different things. I'll keep it short by saying the time that we're spending on screens, and especially on social media, it's affecting how we think, how we feel, and what we believe about ourselves and the world at large. And all of that is to say that this graph is actually a lot freakier than you probably initially thought. Because that free time is not just something that you spend on experiences, it's something that you invest. The way that you use it determines the kind of person you become. Now, I know that was a bit heavy. I do want to shift to a more positive note, which is that no one is destined for this outcome. I'm actually quite optimistic about our ability to overcome this problem. And that's because I've seen people do it. I worked with 110 students in that course at Berkeley over the 3 semesters that I taught it. The average screen time reduction over the 12-week class was 3.5 hours per day, over 50%. Now, I haven't been able to stay in touch with all of these students in the years since they left the course, but there's quite a few of them that I know that are still down at 2 hours a day after being at 7 or 8 hours prior to the course. So it's possible to really change it. I've seen it happen. And the benefits of doing that are just enormous. I mean, if you're a teenager or a young adult today and you have a healthy, moderate relationship with technology, it is a superpower. You have like 4 or 5 extra hours in the day that you can use however you want. That's such an unbelievable advantage. So certainly, sure enough, I had a number of students get 4.0s for the first time in college, the semester that they took this class, and got all this time back. So I want to share with you all the 4 keys that we uncovered while teaching this course that enabled these students to reduce their screen time by so much. Those 4 keys are intentions, environment, habits, and mindset. Now, when I say intentions, I just mean your goals and objectives for spending time online, especially on social media. And based off of everything that I've said thus far, you might assume that I'm going to advocate for intentions that would make you want to book a flight to Finland and go participate in the annual mobile phone throwing world championships and just chuck your phone as far as you possibly can and never use it again. This is a real event that happens in Finland every year. I think that is hilarious, but it's not what I'm advocating for. There's so many positives to these devices. It's not all bad. There are great things about social media still, even with as much as it's changed. I am on Instagram and YouTube on pretty much a daily basis. I believe they are net positives in my life. So I'm not saying that we need to get rid of them, or that our kids should never use them, or that we should throw the phones away and get a flip phone and live under a bridge. I don't know. There's a lot of extreme reactions, I think, to social media and time online. And I think there's a more nuanced perspective that we can take on this that just revolves around changing the way that we think about how we use these platforms, around one really simple idea, which is that none of them are actually free. We just pay for them with our time. But we forget in the moment how valuable our time is. And a thought experiment I've been asking students to do recently is I get them to think about Warren Buffett, who last time I checked was worth about $160 billion. But he's also 94 years old. And I asked them, would you switch places with Warren Buffett? They all say no. So okay, they value the rest of their time more than $160 billion. And then I asked them, how much would someone have to pay you for you to sell 312 months of your remaining free time? There's not a number. It's priceless. But we forget that in the moment. Another way to think about this, imagine you woke up tomorrow And all of the social media apps and YouTube and everything decided, you know what, we're not actually going to be free anymore. We're going to start charging people monthly subscription fees to keep their accounts active. How much could they get you to pay per month? Does anyone want to share? What number comes to mind? Nothing?
0.
$10? $12.99, $14.99. Yeah, most people say somewhere in the range of nothing to $20 a month. The highest serious answer that I've gotten to this question, I had a middle school girl look me dead in the eyes and with a completely straight face say, I would pay $250 a month for TikTok. You would or your parents would? Yeah. Where are you getting these $250 a month? That's $3,000 a year. That's so much money. We hear that, we think that's ludicrous. There's no way it's worth that much. But I believe in a certain way, some of us are actually already paying more. So second question, if you had the option to buy an extra hour of the day that you could use however you wanted to, hanging out with friends and family, spending time with your dog, sleeping for an extra hour, being outside, you could even use this hour to obviously work a job and make all that money back and more. How much would you pay per hour? Now everyone has a different answer to that question. For the sake of this thought experiment, I'm just gonna say that you value your time at a rate of 20 bucks an hour. Again, different for everyone, we're just gonna say 20. If you're spending 2 hours a day on an app like TikTok, and there are 30 days in a month, you're basically paying $1,200 per month for TikTok with your time. So when we think about it in this way, we realize, wow, many of us are actually overpaying for social media, even though technically it's free. So my ask of all of you and all the students at Bentley yesterday is really simple. It's not to get rid of it completely, it's just to figure out what does it mean for you to get a good deal out of it. And I think it's important to acknowledge there's no one right answer to that. It can be different for everyone. I honestly think someone can spend 3 hours a day on social media and have a better relationship with it than someone spending 30 minutes. It totally depends how and why they're using it, what kind of content they're interacting with. Is it active engagement or passive consumption? There's a lot of different things at play, but we have to understand for ourselves what value is this adding to my life and how much of my time is that worth. And any additional time you're spending, you're getting ripped off, and they're making money off of that time. So just make sure you're getting a good deal. The next set of intentions I think it's important to think about are around your content diet, which I believe is just as important as your nutritional diet. In the same way that the food that we're eating is clearly impacting the health of our bodies, the information that we're consuming is impacting the health of our brains and our minds. We should treat it with the same level of respect. So here's a tool that I like to use to evaluate the quality of someone's content diet. I call it the content map, and it looks at two things. What is the nature of the content that you are consuming? Is it entertaining or informative? Some content can be both, and that's great. It can also be neither. Just look at the LinkedIn Reels for examples of that. If that's the case, I would say it's just not worth your time. But we also have to ask ourselves, what is the duration of the individual pieces of content that we're consuming? Because if we have 2 hours to spend online, one option is to go watch a movie, in which case we are focused on one plot line for the entire time. We're tracking characters, getting to know their personalities, seeing them in different social circumstances. It's a mentally engaging thing to follow a movie for 2 hours. Alternatively, we could go to TikTok where the average video is 15 seconds. So we would watch almost 500 videos in that same 2-hour window. When you understand that your brain is constantly changing and rewiring itself based on your daily behavior, it quickly becomes clear how problematic that habit can be. Because if you're spending multiple hours per day switching your attention every 15 seconds, it makes it far more difficult to stay focused on anything for an extended period of time. So it's no wonder all these studies are coming out showing the extreme negative impact on attention span from the short form video consumption. So not all content is the same. Not all screen time is the same. We cannot treat it the same. My main piece of advice is that bottom left corner, we should just view as dessert. It's like the candy of the internet. And that doesn't mean we should never have any of it, but I don't think it should be 80+% of the time we're spending consuming content online, especially in comparison to the stuff on the top half of this graph. I mean, it's easy to forget what the internet really is. It's all the information that humans have ever recorded at our fingertips all the time. It's the most incredible resource we've ever been given access to. For most of human history, very few people had access to the best information. Now anyone with an internet connection can take an MIT course online. Any skill we want to build, any topic we're interested in. There's access to the best information now. We can be a fly on the wall for conversations between the smartest people on the planet while we wash the dishes or walk the dog. That's amazing. So we can't just lump it all together. We need to think critically about what we want to get out of the time we spend online. So hopefully that helps orient you around some potentially new intentions for interacting with the internet. Those intentions are good, they're important, they're helpful. Alone, for the vast majority of people, they are not enough, including for myself. That bottom left corner, it is so well designed to make you use it unintentionally. You just want to stack the cards in your favor to make it easier for yourself. And there's a lot of ways to do that. The simplest way is to control your environment. And this just comes down to limiting the amount of willpower that is required to be intentional. There's a lot of ways to do this. The simplest one is to move your phone charger away from the bed. I have tested a lot to improve my own relationship with technology, and I've tested a lot while running that course at Berkeley. I honestly think this is the #1 tip. If you can stay off of screens for the last 30 minutes of the day and the first 30 minutes of the day, the other 23 hours get a lot easier. Just moving the phone charger can have such a big impact. There was also this study that came out of the University of Texas that found just the location of your phone is actually influencing your brain power. They had people take an IQ test on a laptop. They varied where the phone was relative to the screen. One group had it on the desk right next to them, turned off and face down. One group had it in their pocket, the third group had it in a different room. It turns out you are measurably less intelligent, and your working memory is worse when your phone is nearby. It actually acts as a brain drain. So next time you're trying to focus on something, move the phone to a different room. You will be measurably smarter as a result. It's quite the life hack. Next, there are digital environment changes. These are the simplest ones. There's a lot that you can do to make your devices less addicting and distracting. I don't have time to go through all of the tips. Again, there's that QR code at the end. I will share one category of apps that I think is particularly helpful. Those are apps like ClearSpace and ScreenSet. So I'll give you a demo of ClearSpace right now. It's a pretty simple concept. What it does is it just forces you to take a delay before you get onto a distracting app. So if I try to go onto Instagram right now, I can't just immediately start using it. ClearSpace actually makes me go through this 15-second breathing exercise, which is super annoying. That's the whole point of the app. And it's great because a lot of the times that we go to these apps, we are literally not aware of the fact that we are doing it. It's totally unconscious. This allows you to start to wake up to that and retrain that unconscious response to stress, boredom, or anxiousness, or whatever it is. It also then asks me, how long do I want to spend on Instagram right now? So I can say, okay, I'm going to go on for 10 minutes. After those 10 minutes are up, it kicks me off the app. I have to go through another breathing delay to keep using it. And I have a budget of 3 sessions on Instagram per day, so a max of 30 minutes. If I decide I want to do a 4th session, ClearSpace will let me do that. It's not a hard block. The consequence is that it texts my friend Kaushal and tells him that I broke my streak on the ClearSpace app. And I picked a great friend for this, because he will call me every single time and give me a hard time about it. Be like, dude, you're the phone guy. What are you doing going on Instagram 4 times in a day? So it's really helpful. And as of just a couple weeks ago, ClearSpace is actually completely free for all students through the end of college. There's a Project Reboot curriculum that we're going to be building into the ClearSpace app in the next few months, so that'll be available in August. And Screen Zen is another alternative. It's not quite as well built out, in my opinion, as the ClearSpace app, but it is free for everyone to download. They just run off of tips. So you can get started with one of these two apps totally for free. Your kids can use ClearSpace for free. I think it's a great way to take a tangible first step that will show up on your device every time you turn to a distracting app. Lastly, there's social environment. And I really cannot understate the critical importance of this one. This is why I speak to schools. When I first started doing Project Reboot work, it was one-on-one consulting with kids. And I kept running into this brick wall, which was the way that their friends use it has a huge impact on the way that they use it. And that's not something that you can solve individually. It takes collective action and effort. So there's a lot to say about this. I mean, we need to get kids involved in this conversation. It's not going to magically resolve itself through top-down restriction. We have to work with them because we have to change the cultural norms and expectations that are influencing the way that they use it. The good news is, so many of them want to see it change. But we have to trust them with that, especially the older ones, the juniors and seniors in high school in particular. We have to work with them. And I hope that one of the major outcomes of me coming to Bentley and giving this talk to all the students is a diffusion of the shame that prevents kids from talking about this. Because if you're beating yourself up because you think it's your fault, it's a lot more difficult to actually call the problem out for what it is. So I hope this leads to more conversations. This cannot just be a one and done, Dino comes to campus, has one conversation, and magically this is resolved. It takes all of us. It's going to take the kids as well. It's not going to happen overnight. We need to have more conversations about this problem and work together to shift the norms. So that's environment. I quickly want to touch on habits because the truth is, even if you got rid of your phone, that underlying problem of escaping discomfort will still be there. We actually have to change the way that we respond to it. And there's no one magical, perfect answer for what the ideal response to stress or boredom or anxiousness or burnout is. But I think there's a general pattern that I find works pretty well as a proxy, which is when we need to take a break, which we do need to take breaks. We're not machines that can just work all the time. Taking breaks that lead to the experience of satisfaction is typically better than just optimizing for the experience of pleasure. So what I mean by this is often when we're feeling really stressed out by school or work or whatever it is, we jump to doing the thing that will make us feel maximally good in the moment. Scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, going on these very dopaminergic apps that give us this big experience of pleasure. The problem with that is it leaves you feeling worse after. Your dopamine levels crash. It's like you've taken an anti-nap. If you scroll through YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels for an hour, you come out on the other side, you feel way more scatterbrained, you're more lethargic, it's more difficult to do hard things. Instead, if we do something that results in the feeling of satisfaction, we now have some momentum, some energy that we can use to go back to whatever it was that was causing us stress in the first place. This can be different for different people. For me, the ultimate form of a break that's very satisfying is throwing a Frisbee around. It's weird, I don't know, it works super well for me. Playing Scrabble online with my friend Shane, who lives in New York. We FaceTime and play Scrabble when I'm stuck on work. It's a perfect little reset for me. Going for a walk, petting a dog, playing an instrument, doodling, FaceTiming a friend. There's a million ways to do this. But generally, optimizing for a feeling of satisfaction, I think, is a pretty good heuristic. And then lastly, mindset. And what I mean by this is just, you can't expect yourself or your kid to be perfect. This is really hard. I'm 25. I've been working on this for 4.5 years now. I'm still not perfect. I still have days where my screen time is higher than I want it to be. That's to be expected. You can't just snap your fingers and expect this to never be an issue again, just because there's awareness of it. Awareness is not enough. And what's really worked for me over the years is just learning how I bounce back from setbacks. What's my routine and my protocol to pull myself out of the downward spiral of avoidant coping through turning to technology. For me, it's really about nailing the evening and the morning and finding ways to engage in quality leisure that kind of resets me and brings me a feeling of satisfaction. Different for everyone, that's what's worked well for me. Okay, that is the content that I shared with all the Bentley students. So you now have all that same background to have discussions from. I now want to shift into a bit of advice that I have for you in the household, again with the qualification of the fact that I'm not a parent myself, but I do think this section of the presentation could be pretty helpful. I quickly want to summarize what the objective is. What does it really mean to have healthy tech use? My definition is pretty simple. It's adherence to informed intentions. So that consists of two things: having an awareness or an understanding of the risks, the consequences, and the potential benefits of using technology, along with the ability to engage with devices in a manner that you perceive as being healthy and productive. And almost every kid, when they first get onto technology, starts off simultaneously intentional and unaware. So they ask you for a smartphone, or for a social media app, or for a video game, with an intention in mind. There's a reason that they want to start using it. And at first, they typically follow through on that intention, but they're usually not fully aware of just how slippery of a slope it can be to have a smartphone sitting in your pocket. So what will typically happen is, as that device starts to become an unconscious response to discomfort, they begin to slide to the left on this graph. They become progressively less intentional, more unintentional. At a certain point, you might say addicted. What happens next is extremely counterintuitive. Pretty much every kid will at some point have an aha moment. They will wake up to the fact that this has become problematic. Typically, this will happen when they either look at their screen time report and realize it's way higher than they thought it was, or they'll stay up super late scrolling through TikTok until 3 in the morning and get a short night of sleep. Or they'll procrastinate on an important assignment because they've gotten sucked into a YouTube rabbit hole. You would think that aha moment, this has become an issue for me, would be the first thing that would get them to come back to the right on this graph and become more intentional. In my experience, from a lot of the conversations that I've had, it actually tends to make the problem worse before it gets better. The reason for that is because, again, the underlying issue is it becomes a coping mechanism for discomfort. And the recognition that you have lost control over your behavior and that your phone is now using you as opposed to you using it is profoundly psychologically uncomfortable. Grappling with the fact that you have lost agency is really hard. And if your phone is your escape from discomfort, that psychological discomfort is not excluded from that. So I've had a lot of conversations with students where they've told me a lot of the time that I spend on social media is just me escaping the uncomfortable conversation with myself about the fact that I can't stop using social media. Now, if they take the right set of steps, they can get back to this top right corner and become simultaneously informed and intentional. My goal with Project Reboot, and I believe your goals as parents, should be to take your kids from wherever they are and get them to that top right corner as quickly as possible. They do not need to do that entire detour. It's not a requirement. So with that context in mind, I want to call out 4 very well-intentioned mistakes that I think are commonly made when approaching screen time. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge what a brutal hand this has been to get dealt as a parent. I was a guinea pig for growing up with social media. You are guinea pigs for raising kids with social media. We haven't had a handbook. There have been no guidelines. It happened super quickly. So it's not a surprise that we didn't 100% nail the rollout of it. So if any of these mistakes have been made, don't stress. They're very common, they're fixable, and I think they come from a really good place. So mistake number 1, letting the train leave the station too early. Now there's some nuance here, but right now the general consensus among leading experts is that kids really should not be on smartphones until they're 14, and shouldn't be on social media, which at this point I think is really addictive entertainment masquerading as social media, until they're 16 years old. Now here's why there's nuance. If your kid's friends are using Snapchat as the default means of logistical communication, and your child is being socially isolated because you won't let them get access to that group chat, you probably want to get them on Snapchat earlier. You can't control what the other kids are doing, right? And this is what you have to weigh as a parent. It's really hard. There's potential risks and consequences of getting them on too early, and then there's the social consequences of being isolated. And that's a tricky trade-off. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution for it. If you do get them on Snapchat before 14, just be careful and cognizant, set up some reasonable limits, have good conversations with them about it. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I think there's a case to get them on it earlier if it's a felt pain in their social life. That doesn't mean that we can't get them phones before they're in high school. I'm a big fan of the wait until 8th movement, which basically tries to get parents to coordinate with each other to delay the adoption of smartphones until kids are in high school, minimizing the social consequences of waiting. In the meantime, you can get them a dumb phone. And there's a lot of these on the market now. There's the Gab phone, the Light phone, the Bark phone, the Wise phone. You can get them a flip phone, but don't get them a flip phone because their friends will definitely make fun of them for that. Get them something with a touchscreen that just doesn't have to have unrestricted access to the internet. The next mistake is, and this is a huge one I think, is underestimating kids' awareness. So I think it's very common for parents to see their kids staying up late playing video games, or half scrolling through TikTok and half watching a TV show, or pulling out their phone and Snapchatting at the dinner table. And they think to themselves, they've been on that phone a lot, might be getting to be a little bit of an issue here. They try to bring it up, right? They say, hey, a lot of screen time today. Why don't we put that phone away and maybe go do something else? And then you get hit with this, right? Get the rolled eyes. The kids shrug it off. They say, you don't know what you're talking about. It's very easy then to assume that that kid is in this bottom left corner, that they have a problem with technology, they're addicted to it, and they are unaware of the fact that it's a problem and there are consequences. My contention is that the vast majority of kids that have a problem with this know that it's a problem. Back in 2016, Common Sense Media did a survey. They asked US teenagers anonymously whether or not they feel addicted to electronic devices. 50% of them said that they do. Yesterday, when I spoke at the upper school, I had the students do a live anonymous poll from their phones. They scanned a QR code, and I asked them, on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you with your relationship with technology right now? 5 being very happy, wouldn't change a thing, 1 being very unhappy. These were the results. So only 1 in 5 students in the Bentley Upper School is happy with their relationship with technology, either a 4 or a 5 out of 5. 40% are a 1 or a 2 out of 5. They know it's a problem. They're aware. The kids that we look at as being in this bottom left corner are usually in the top left corner. They know it's a problem. They're freaking out about it. And that denial is really just shame because they're blaming themselves. Now, if you're a parent and you're under the impression that your kid is in that bottom left corner, that they have a problem, they don't know it's a problem, they don't understand the consequences, it's then completely natural to make mistake number 3, which is to dwell on the negative. And to say things like, you are spending way too much time on that phone. Why don't you go do something productive? Have you seen these new studies? Instagram is super bad for your mental health. Don't you know what TikTok is doing to your attention span? And the intention behind all of these statements is really good. Again, if you're genuinely under the impression they're in that bottom left corner, it totally makes sense to say all of this. But again, the underlying reason that it becomes an issue in the first place is this. It's the escaping discomfort. And all of those statements incite guilt, fear, shame, stress, anxiousness. all of which they're probably conditioned to run away from by seeking distraction online. So the way in which we try to raise their awareness determines, do they go up and to the left or up and to the right on this graph. The last mistake, and there's some nuance here as well, is cultivating a me versus you mindset. Now, as a parent, you do have the parent card that you can play. There are tools at your fingertips that you can use to set up restrictions. iOS has screen time limits. There are third-party apps that you can use, like Bark or Life360. You can turn the internet off at 10 p.m. There's a lot of ways that you can force a restriction onto your kid's screen time. The problem is that we are raising the single greatest generation of hackers that the world has ever seen. These kids are so good at getting around restrictions. I actually have not found a completely bulletproof way to restrict a kid's technology use. So the way in which you implement the restrictions matters a lot. If it is this top-down, I'm setting the rules and you are following them, AKA me versus you, from the kid's perspective, that typically comes off as you are my enemy and my phone is my friend, they're probably not going to respond very well to the restrictions. The main transition that I would encourage you to try to make if you're in this me versus you mindset, and this is a point of contention in the household, is you want to shift over to us versus addictive technology. You want what's best for them. You are on their team. Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat are not. They just want to make money off their time and attention. So another way to think about this, transitioning from being a judge that imposes rules without their consent and expects them to follow, to being a guide that helps them figure out their ideal relationship with technology and then holds them accountable to that ideal. Here's the good news. It's amazing how much overlap there is in what kids and parents really want. When I ask them that question, what deserves the largest chunk of those remaining 334 months? Their answers are identical to the answers from parents. They do not say TikTok. They say time outside. They say playing sports, being with friends and family, traveling. They want the same thing. So if you ask them the right set of questions, the vast majority of kids will back themselves into a very reasonable set of intentions. Look at their calendar, map out how much free time they actually have, and then ask them what deserves the largest chunk of it. They'll typically end up saying 2, maybe 3 hours per day tops of unintentional screen time or non-productive screen time. That's much more likely to be something that they actually stick to if it's their idea, and you can just hold them accountable to it. So here's some ways to change the conversation. For one, be vulnerable and transparent. Look at this map and ask yourself genuinely, where are you on the axis of intentional to addicted? Kids are not the only ones that are struggling with this. My grandparents, for crying out loud, are on Facebook all day long. It's unbelievable. I think at this point they're probably personally responsible for at least 1% of Mark Zuckerberg's net worth. It's absurd. If you are perfectly intentional in how you use technology, congratulations on literally being a unicorn. It's like nobody at this point. Don't hide that from them. That's actually a really good opportunity to put yourself on their team. If you're a kid and you've been internally beating yourself up over the fact that you're spending more time on TikTok or YouTube than you want to, and then you hear dad say, you know, I gotta be honest, I got sucked down a YouTube rabbit hole today. I think my relationship with it could use some work. Now it's easier, more comfortable to open up the conversation. And then again, just acknowledging how tough this is. You didn't grow up with social media. You know what it's like to use it as an adult. It's different as a teenager. It has changed childhood in a way that you really can't fully understand unless you've lived it. It's probably the biggest generation gap we've ever had. And that's hard as a parent, to not really know what they're going through with this stuff. Acknowledge that. Tell them, you know, we didn't have this when I was growing up, and from a parent's perspective, it's hard to figure out what my role should be in helping you build a positive relationship with it. I hope you can bear with me as I try to figure it out and we can work together. I think that kind of language tends to land pretty well, at least in my experience. Next, being curious and open-minded. I think one area that parents are often relatively unaware is of the positive ways that kids want to use this stuff. It's not all bad. And if you paint with too broad of a brush and you just write it off as all being a complete waste of time, you lose credibility in their eyes. They have legitimate reasons they want to use it. So be curious. Ask them, what role does Instagram or Snapchat play in your social life or the social lives of your friends at school? How do you think teens are using social media differently than parents are? Who are some of your favorite creators and why? What are you doing when you're spending time on these apps? Why do you enjoy it? I'm curious. I think that tends to help open up the conversation as well. Next, I call this planting as much as you prune. And what I mean by this is there's really two main strategies that you can use to change how your kids are using technology. You can focus on pruning or cutting away as much of the negative screen time as possible. Or you can focus on planting or instilling a desire in them to leverage the positive aspects of the internet. In most cases, I think the latter can actually be more effective. And there's so many ways to do it. There's so much great content online. There are YouTube channels like Mark Rober. I don't know if anyone's familiar with him. This guy's awesome. He's this former NASA engineer. He makes all of these amazing science and engineering videos. He's got a dartboard that you can never not get a bullseye on because it's on a robotic arm and it tracks the dart in midair and moves to the right place. He talks through the whole process of building them. It gets kids really excited about STEM. You can take master classes or watch YouTube videos where you learn how to cook amazing recipes. What an awesome way to get a tangible benefit out of screen time that you can get rewarded for with a delicious meal in the matter of half an hour to an hour. If you can get kids excited about that top right corner of the content map, TikTok just becomes inherently less attractive. And then lastly, there's really no way around it. You as a parent have to model the healthy tech habits yourself. They're looking at the way that you're using your phone, and they're taking notes. There's this thing called phubbing. It's short for phone snubbing. And it's when a kid makes a bid for your attention, and that bid is denied because you are pulled into a device. It's actually been shown that the rate at which parents phub their kids is a predictive factor in whether or not those kids will go on to develop mobile phone addiction. So they're looking at the way that you're using it, and they're implicitly taking messages from that. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use a phone in front of them. Quite the opposite. I think you should. You should just call out how and why you're using it, especially with the younger ones. Because we have these assumptions, right? When I'm up here and I'm giving a talk and I see someone pull a phone out, I just intuitively jump to, I've lost them, this part of the presentation must not be that interesting, I have to go back to the drawing board here and make it more engaging. I have no idea what they're doing on the phone. They could be taking notes, they could be downloading ClearSpace, I've got no clue. On the flip side, if I see someone with a pen and paper and they're writing things down, I'm like, oh nice, they're really into this. This is like a great part of the presentation for sure. They could be writing a journal entry about how much they hate this talk and can't wait to go home and watch TikTok. I've got no idea. We just make assumptions, right? So just, especially with the younger ones, calling it out and acknowledging, give me 30 seconds to respond to this work email so I can get it off my mind. After that, I'm all yours. I think that's just a good practice to have. And then lastly, if you're in a situation where it is established this is a problem, they know it's a problem, you've had conversations about it, you're trying to figure out what to do, one intervention that I have found to be helpful is to do some form of a digital detox. Now, there's a bit of a fad around this, and I don't want to have this come across as me saying just deleting Instagram and YouTube for 1 week is going to magically solve this problem. It won't. It's also pretty hard to effectively do a digital detox in the swing of daily life. It's so deeply integrated into the way that we live in the modern world. The best way to do it, if it's possible, is to send your kid to a summer camp. Genuinely. The reason for this, not only are they fully unplugged and offline, they're unplugged and offline surrounded by friends. I've had a lot of students tell me, college students, say, I think my relationship with my phone is better than the average person's because I went to the summer camp for a month where my only form of social interaction was face-to-face. It was playing cards with friends, it was sitting around a campfire sharing stories, and it just made me realize how much more deeply gratifying that kind of social connectedness is. You cannot put that into words. That has to be felt and experienced. And unfortunately, I mean, it breaks my heart, but for a lot of kids these days, they don't know what that feels like. When they're hanging out with friends in a social setting, phones are out. They're scrolling while sitting next to each other. It happens at lunch tables all around the United States. They don't know what it actually feels like to deeply connect face to face. I think it's one of the best things that you can do for them. And it will make it so much easier to fight this battle because they'll know what they're missing out on. Okay, that was a lot of information. I hope that that was helpful. Here's a QR code with access to all those take-home resources. And we now have time for questions. So if anyone has anything that they would like to discuss, feel free to raise a hand and we can talk through it. Yeah.
You talked a lot about, first of all, thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
A lot of great insights. Something to teach and take and try to practice.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
We have 2 kids, one of whom is the executive functioning of a 35-year-old that reads and has incredible ability to self-control. The other of whom has a pretty addictive personality and loves video games. And we have been exploring different ways to passion video games. So the way we do it now, which seems to be pretty effective, is set a timer for 3 minutes, and she gets a little 1-minute warning before it's really game over. But all of that kind of preface to ask the question, how do you think about everything you've been discussing in the context of video games?
Yeah, great question. So for anyone that couldn't hear, it was how do you think about video games as opposed to social media? You, in the same way that you can't lump screen time and content consumption together, you cannot do the same thing with video games. You gotta look at each game individually. And there's a few core critical questions that you need to ask. One, is it social? If they're playing with friends and they're connecting over, I mean, it's not the same thing as being in person face-to-face having a conversation, but it is a shared bonding activity. They're collaborating with each other, they're playing on a team together, competing with each other. I think it can be a healthy form of play, and I think play is an important thing for kids. So if they're doing it socially with friends, I think that's a bump in the right direction, as opposed to them being completely on their own playing solo. Second, what is it like from an attention perspective? Are they deeply bought into a storyline that's evolving over time? I mean, some video games, it's like you're a character in a movie, right? From an attention perspective, that can actually be a beneficial thing. If you're world building and creating, you know, a new society and using resources, and it can be very complex, right? You can actually be training your brain in a positive direction. That's very different from playing Candy Crush, where you're just passively sorting gems on a screen. Very different thing for your brain. And lastly, thinking about what are potentially some benefits of spending this time. Like Minecraft, for instance, is very creative. It helps with spatial reasoning. It's effectively digital Legos. I mean, I know there's some other game modes and things that are not as directly creative as the kind of base mode of just building whatever structures or world you want, but we're not calling together parent events on Lego addiction, right? It's different, but it's just on a screen. And they're doing a similar thing cognitively. So I think you have to look at that differently from just a repetitive, very just stimulus-based, dopaminergic game like Fortnite. I would say is kind of more on the Candy Crush side. If they're playing with friends, it's a little bit different, but you just have to look at each game individually. And one thing that I found can be helpful is when you think about how much time to set and constraints to put, you really have to look at it in the context of their life more generally. Is it replacing time that would otherwise be spent being active, engaging with friends in person, getting homework done, and sleeping? If they're ticking those boxes elsewhere, I think it's fine to allow them to use some free time playing video games, especially with friends. So you have to look at what's it getting in the way of. If they're checking the other boxes, I think it's less concerning. And then the last thing that I'll share with kids that have an addictive personality, because I have a super addictive personality, and I actually think it can be kind of a superpower. I've learned how to harness it in a direction that helps me. One thing that's great for me is measuring and gamifying things, positive behaviors that I want to reinforce. So getting an Oura ring, right? If you're having an issue with them staying up late, playing video games and not going to sleep, all of a sudden you start tracking the sleep score. And if you're a competitive person like I am that wants to see that number go up, it's now a stronger incentive to put the games down and go to bed. So that's another thing that's worked for me. Good question. Yeah?
A technical question, then a broader question. Technical, what do you suggest we use to monitor screen time for ourselves and others? Because Apple clearly doesn't have an incentive to tell me everything I'm doing. Is there anything that you found that's better?
Yeah, I can repeat that question. It was just, what do I recommend using?
Is there something better than Apple or the in-phone screen time monitor?
Yeah, so for screen time monitoring, I mean, I actually think that the Apple screen time monitoring is pretty decent. One thing I recommend doing is setting up a widget on your home screen. So the way that I have it configured is I have no distracting apps that show up on my home screen at all. It's just apps I want to encourage myself to check and widgets that give me access to helpful information. So I have like my to-do list, weather, calendar, and then I have a screen time widget right here that shows me total screen time for the day. So that way I have to face it on a daily basis. I found that really helpful. ClearSpace also has, by the way, I'm not getting paid to endorse ClearSpace, it really is my tool of choice. They have a friends feature. So in the same way that my friend Kaushal gets a text message, I can actually see how much screen time like 8 of my friends have had in the current day and how many times they've opened distracting apps. So that's another helpful tool to use. But I know that Apple also has family monitoring as well. So I think with just those tools, you can get pretty far. There's some other ones out there, but.
Okay, and then the broader question is, we are all in this room with the notable exception of you, people who are interested in how our children are doing at school. As an academician, and somebody who focuses on this, I'm going to ask it 2 ways. Number one is, do you think schools would be better served to restrict access to phones during the school day? And then would you, as a parent, if you did have a child, have a view on if you could go to school A or school B and one restricted phone use, would you make a decision on that basis?
Good question. So I'll qualify this answer by saying it's still early with the whole phone ban thing. And I will form a more firm position as we get more data back on the efficacy of bell-to-bell phone bans. My gut right now, based on all the conversations I'm having, the things I'm seeing in schools, because I've been to a lot of schools at this point, many have phone bans, many don't. I think in K-8 it makes sense to go bell-to-bell, no phone, because I honestly don't think kids should have smartphones at that age anyway. So I think you help the social environment, you make it easier for the parents that aren't getting their kids on phones before they go to high school. I'm on board with that. I think it's tenuous in high school. I think there are some unintended consequences to bell-to-bell phone bans that I don't think we're talking about enough. For one, it doesn't prepare you to live life with a phone in your pocket. And for me, it was the transition into college that really made this difficult. It is for a lot of other students that I've worked with. So expecting them to be able to seamlessly navigate that very difficult transition while also having instant gratification in their pocket all the time for the first time in their lives, challenging. I also think, again, we will not solve this problem if we don't get the kids on board. We have to work with them. And there's so much potential to do that. They are not happy with how they're using it right now. If the phone ban is something that we can get them on board with, and they say, hey, yeah, it would actually be really nice if we didn't have phones as a distraction at lunchtime, then I think it could make sense. But I think otherwise, and in most cases, you run the risk of redirecting that latent potential for cultural change in a positive direction towards this kind of anti-authority, this is belittling, we deserve access to technology, and they'll find ways around it. Schools that have implemented yonder pouches, I've heard a lot of stories about kids buying magnets on Amazon that unlock the pouches and then selling them on campus at markup. Very entrepreneurial, but goes against the whole cause. I kind of go back and forth because I do still feel like 14 is a little bit young to have a smartphone with social media in your pocket all the time. If I were to draw the line, I would probably put it at like juniors and seniors, allow them to have access to it so they can learn to live with it, but it's difficult to enforce different things in the school. It's tough. I think the biggest thing we need to do is try to work more with the kids and involve them in the conversation. Because again, there's so much potential for it to shift, given the fact they are unhappy with how they're using it right now. It would not be a driving factor for me in deciding a school, whether or not they have a bell-to-bell phone ban or not, at least at this point.
This is sort of along the lines of the us versus addictive technology conversation, and I have to admit, I and some of this row have younger kids, but what language do you use specifically to talk to kids, especially younger kids, about what exactly dopamine addictions are and how these type of addictive technologies, especially like gaming, actually does to their brain in a way that they can understand it at a younger age?
Yeah, so I actually think a really approachable analogy to use is candy. So if you think about it, there's a recurring underlying pattern in a lot of this problematic technology, and that's that it gives us access to pleasure that is supposed to be our body's response signal to us doing a behavior that's good for our health. So with candy, we've artificially concentrated sugar into a form that would never be possible in nature. And it tricks our physiology. It makes us think we've just eaten 30 strawberries in one bite, and it's really good for our chances of survival, right? But that's clearly a trick. So in other words, we've bypassed the actual fulfillment of an underlying need and gone straight to the reward that's supposed to be a reinforcement of that need being met. Does that make sense? Similar thing is happening with social media and video games. So social media, in many cases, is candy for social connection. It gives you a shortcut to the pleasure that is supposed to be a response to you deepening a relationship. When kids are scrolling through these feeds, a lot of the videos, it's someone talking directly into a camera. It's actually been shown that the engagement on videos of just talking head directly to the camera goes up when the person is closer. If they're farther away, it tends to go down because you want it to feel like a conversation. So someone's talking into this camera, it's usually someone they relate to, someone they look up to, someone with high social status, and it feels like you're having a conversation with them. So you get pleasure from that, but it's not a connection. It's a one-way street that takes zero effort. And in the same way that eating candy does not give you a feeling of satisfaction, it just gives you pleasure, which is problematic because satisfaction is your signal to stop the behavior. We get a feeling of satisfaction in the form of fullness when eating a nutritious meal that makes us stop eating. We'll just keep eating candy unless we have some level of self-control or self-restraint until we get to a point of kind of feeling sick. It decreases your ability to experience pleasure when you overindulge on candy. It zaps your motivation to actually engage in a behavior that meets the underlying need of nourishment. Same thing happens with socializing on social media. I think it zaps kids' drive to connect with each other. With video games, when kids are using them to procrastinate on homework, they're taking a shortcut to the pleasure associated with making meaningful progress on something that's important to them with less effort. And it zaps your motivation to a certain extent. So the answer is you want to frame it as indulgence in technology that gives you shortcut to reward should be like eating dessert. Fill the underlying need first. Now that language might be a little bit complicated for a young child. I recognize that. I'm trying to figure out how to adopt that kind of terminology into something that's going to work for younger students. I start with doing stuff in college, and then I go down to high school and then middle school. I just did that talk for the first time in college, and now I'm breaking it down. So I'm trying to figure out how to make that more approachable. Yeah. Frame it in terms of candy and ask them to reflect on how they feel before and after indulging in a behavior like that. And you'll see, again, scrolling through social media, for instance, you feel like you've taken an anti-nap at the end of it. Yeah.
Where do you lump Apple Watches in all this? Am I allowed?
Where do I lump Apple Watches in on all of this? I think, for me, I actually think it's comparable to a dumb phone, at least in my experience, because it's not a content consumption device. Like, nobody's scrolling through TikTok on an Apple Watch, at least not that I'm aware of. I don't even think it's possible to do that. I love my Apple Watch because it allows me to leave the house without a phone in my pocket and still communicate. I think there's a problem of having consistent notifications distracting you from the present moment. And if your notification settings aren't set up in a good way, or if the social environment that you're existing in is requiring you to get pulled out of the moment to go to the device too regularly, then it's a problem. But I actually think as a form of technology for communication, it's pretty solid. To get kids onto that, it's pretty clunky. It's high friction to use. I'm kind of a fan, to be honest.
I was at the upper school coffee today, and there were 5 seniors there today talking about a question in regards to technology, and they all have echoed exactly what you have been telling them for the last 24 hours, so I appreciate that. And also my 13-year-old, 14-year-old just asked to download Space, and my husband said, well, I don't know what that app is, and so we need to figure that out. She's like, no, this is what it is. So again, like 2 data points in the last 24 hours. I appreciate this. But one of my questions is, you said send them away to camp. And I understand why, but how can I do that for my 4th grader and 8th grader by keeping them at home? Is that, collaborating on how much time is like an amount for summer? Like, I would like to keep them around, but I also would like to give them the opportunity to go out to the street and play with their friends. And, is that screen time that we collaborate on and agree on, let's say it's 2 hours per day, does that mean that, like, I'm the one that has to keep the timer set, or my 4th grader needs to do that? Like, at what point do these things become their responsibility versus my responsibility?
For younger students like that, I would play a heavier hand in building restrictions that are going to pull them off. I just don't think, definitely not for me when I was in 4th grade, you could not rely on me to set a timer to pull myself off of video games. Like, that's just not gonna happen. So pretty much like every gaming console has parental controls and timers and stuff. So set that up. Have a restriction where you don't have to remember, you don't have to be the bad guy in the moment. Have the device kick them off. In terms of giving them a similar experience to summer camp without actually sending them away, you can do that. Parents actually need to, I think, work together to cultivate environments for kids to have free play that mimics a lot of the benefit of summer camp. Being outside, playing games with each other, having unstructured and relatively, the degree to which it's unmonitored, I think, is probably a subject I probably shouldn't touch on as like a non-parent. But I think free play is an important part of childhood. And that's definitely one of the Jonathan Haidt anxious generation norms that I'm most on board with. I think when we give them compelling alternatives to screen time, it's so much easier to manage the problem. And this is actually a big thing we're leaning into with Project Reboot clubs that we're starting, is we're trying to bring a summer camp experience to lunch or to college campuses where kids have access to a higher quality, more intentional form of leisure on a regular basis that consists of face-to-face interaction and doing things that bring them energy as opposed to zapping it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, what I appreciate about what you're saying, like here, I feel like we're all learning as individuals the idea that we need to build up our own resolve, our own, stamina, like whatever, to navigate the world. What are you going to choose to do? What are you not going to choose to do? But I feel like I tell my kids, like, it's kind of a losing proposition. There's billions of dollars on the line intentionally making it so that you can't make these choices yourself. So I think with the summer camp and thinking about a school, I think there's also like a systemic way to approach this. You change a culture at a summer camp, right? That's a whole group that's bought into a certain way of being. And I think you can do that at a school or a workplace or whatever, like you found in New York. So I love this, and I hope that this kind of develops into modules or, expands into looking at these structures, systems, workplaces, education, so that no one alone, has to do that. Because that feeling of shame or whatever that a kid has, like, it's not going to be enough to just talk about it and let them know, like, hey, it's okay. I think it's like, you have to really look at, and I'm hoping that you guys are doing this, because I really want the answer soon, but like, the gambling, you made that point, these are intentionally designed to addict. So what are the anti-addiction methods that we all need to employ in order to help pull kids, out of that? It's not just about like, are you born with an addictive personality or not? Because all the money is put on getting the kids to develop that early. So anyway, I like what you're saying. I hope you build it up.
Yeah, we're working on it. I think the big realization that I've had recently is like we need more third spaces for people to connect with each other. A way to frame it with the candy analogy is you will eat less candy after you have a nutritious meal. If you go run a half marathon and then there's a bowl of candy in front of you, you're gonna finish that bowl of candy, right? But if you first have a nutritious, balanced dinner, you'll eat less. And anecdotally, experientially for me, that's so true of the way that I use social media and entertainment as well. When I have those buckets filled in more fulfilling ways, I'm just less drawn to it. So I'm glad that part of it is resonating with you, because I think it's something that we're trying to support and work with students to make that easier. We've got students that are working with me to build conversation cards that we're going to start distributing to schools to put on lunch tables to make it easier for kids to connect and all of this stuff. But it really needs to be like a societal level, more conversations, parents getting involved, schools getting involved, giving better alternatives to have that nutritious version of social connection and leisure.
Just one thing, Dino, I want to say that part of the contract was that I was going to ensure that Dino was able to leave campus at some point. So I want to start to call it. I'll leave to your judgment, Dino.
I have nowhere that I have to be, so if anybody if you need to
I
close
wish you
the
hadn't
room,
said that.
if you need to close the room, we can. But I'll just say I'll stick around, and if people want to come up and ask questions, I'm not like in a rush by any means. Yeah.
So I'll apologize up front for this may be a dumb question, but I'm not a social media kind of guy. I'm not on TikTok or Instagram or even Facebook. And so while you're finishing your talk, I kind of looked on my screen time for my iPhone and was shocked at the level that I'm at. Because I was going to chastise my son for seeing where he was, and I've kind of seen myself that I'm not where I should be. So my question is, how do you define screen time? Is it like my time on email? Is it my time looking at my GPS? Because my hours are a lot higher than I thought they would be. So I'm just curious at how to define it.
Yeah, great question. I mean, not all screen time is the same, right? If you're using it as a tool with a clear intention and a purpose, I really wouldn't be worried about it. The time that I spent on Apple Maps, I'm definitely not beating myself up over. I think it really is a question of, are you running towards it with a purpose, or are you using it to run away from something else, right? Or are you getting sucked into it without having a clear goal and purpose in mind for using it? There is such a thing, I think, as being on email too much. Sometimes I catch myself opening email and clicking refresh to see if new things have come in, even though I know that they haven't. That can happen. But I would say that's a very different kind of screen time than passively scrolling through TikTok as a form of mind numbing. You know, I wouldn't worry too much about that, although everything in moderation.
Thank you. I have him sign a contract that he only could stay on the phone a certain amount of hours, a video game, and I confiscate if he goes over. As I said, I'm going to bed, and you need to get off video games by 12 o'clock. As I pop up at 12 o'clock in bed and you're still on it, remote controls the phones goes to sleep. And it works for me.
Yeah.
It does, because I set limits. I don't know, is that an appropriate way for a teenager, or?
How old?
He's 15.
15?
Uh-huh.
That feels appropriate. I think it shouldn't be something where you just set the limits once and then have them the same forever. I think having it be a conversation, hearing his perspective on how and why he wants to use it, and transitioning towards having him be more self-reliant and self-regulating as he approaches leaving the nest is an important thing. I think for at age 15, that feels pretty appropriate to me, but being cognizant of taking the training wheels off and preparing him to go off to college and not end up one of these kids that you hear about that drops out of school in the first semester because they're staying up until 4 a.m. playing video games. Like, that's a competency that needs to be built up in a self-determined way, but I think you're doing a good thing by helping.
Yeah, because usually I get up and he's going to bed. I'm like, okay.
I just want to mention something that you said about disconnect to the internet. It works. Yes, my niece, my brother have been right there at 10 o'clock. I have it disconnected. It's been like that for a long time. They respect that.
That's great.
So I know it works.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
You mentioned Jonathan Haidt, and I feel like I'm sure many, especially I have younger kids, it's very easy to like eat up everything that he says and be like, yes, this. Wait till 8, and I mean, I feel like I follow and think highly of him, and I'm curious as somebody who talks to kids and frankly like focuses more on the post-middle school years, are there things about that sort of philosophy that you actually find problematic, or areas, and he's like, you know, where you would actually caution, because I think, I'm aware of the fact that it's maybe slightly the pendulum swinging too far in one direction. I'm also aware of the fact that a lot of these really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So.
I would say I'm like 95% aligned with I think he's done so much good in generating conversations around the need for restriction. And there does need to be restriction. Part of the approach that we have to play in helping kids build healthy relationships with technology is we do need to step in and restrict. But at a certain point, you have to shift to empowerment because they're going to leave the nest. And I just think that's the one area that he maybe hasn't talked enough about, and I don't really fault him for that too much. I mean, if you're not boots on the ground, having a ton of conversations with kids and having grown up with social media, having really experienced that side of it, I think it makes sense to over-index on restriction a little bit, and that's better than not doing anything, right? I just think we need to have a two-pronged approach of we don't just set rules. We tell them why, we get their buy-in, and we give them an on-ramp into living life with a phone in their pocket, which they will do at some point. That's my only critique. But I think by and large, I'm a big John Hyde fan, and I think pretty much all the stuff that he's written has been, on balance, big net positive. So yeah, good question.
Oh, I have one very specific question related to what you were saying. Is there a way to monitor your distracting app screen time? Like, is anything, like the screen time number that you see, that is your full screen time,
If
correct?
you click in to see all activity, it breaks it down into by app and by category.
Well, but there's no way you can like group it such that it's spoon feeding it to you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, it's funny, I was at the ClearSpace office today talking about doing this.
Okay, great.
There are other apps that, like ScreenZen, I do believe you can exclude some apps from your screen time that's being tracked. Opal does this as well. You can designate some apps as being productive and some non-productive. So there are third-party apps that are working on developing that, yeah. But in Apple's native screen time, no, you have to go
Everything.
in but it does show you the breakdown of it. So you can filter down into how much time I've spent on this one app for this week.
Thank you.
All right, I don't want to hold anyone that needs to be here to shut the room down for longer. Again, I can stay.